6 months. 6 months since Michael was gone. They said it was an accident. A tragic, senseless accident. But grief isn't senseless. I came here every day to feel closer to him, to remember. And every day I left with the same emptiness. Until today. He leaned in, his voice a low, urgent whisper. He didn't die. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe and like this video. The words hung in the air, colder than the rain, heavier than the grief that had settled upon me for months. He didn't die. It was impossible. A cruel joke played by my own mind, a figment of my grief-addled imagination. My mind screamed for logic, for reason. But the way he had said it, the urgency in his whisper, the way he had vanished so completely, it felt real, too real to dismiss. And just like that, the silence of the cemetery wasn't empty anymore. It was filled, suffocatingly, with a terrifying, impossible question, a question that demanded an answer, even if it shattered what little peace I had found in my sorrow. The path ahead was unknown, but the path behind me, the one of simple grief, was irrevocably gone. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, a fleeting escape that my mind now refused to grant. Every waking moment, those 3 impossible words echoed in my head, a relentless drumbeat. He didn't die. My friends, my family, they noticed. They saw the frantic energy, the haunted look in my eyes. They thought I was unraveling, that the grief had finally pushed me over the edge into delusion. And maybe, in some part of me, I feared they were right. But I couldn't shake the feeling, the conviction that something was profoundly wrong, that the truth I had accepted was a meticulously crafted lie. I tried to explain to the officer on the phone, my voice tight with frustration, that I wasn't questioning their thorough investigation, but simply had a feeling, a need to ask about any anomalies, any overlooked details in the accident report. They were patient, almost condescendingly so, assuring me everything had been meticulously investigated, all angles covered. There was nothing more to see. I hung up, the click of the phone echoing my frustration. Their placid assurances only fueled my unease. Everyone around me urged me to move on, to accept it, to embrace the slow, painful process of healing. But how could I, when this unsettling seed had been planted so violently in my mind? I started looking at everything differently. The accident report, which I'd read 100 times in my grief, now seemed too neat, too perfectly explained. Michael was a careful driver, meticulous to a fault. The weather that day had been clear, almost unnaturally so for the season. And the location of the crash, it was on a quiet, almost forgotten back road he rarely, if ever, used. Why that road? He always took the highway, the faster, safer route. The questions began to multiply, each one a tiny thread pulling at the fabric of my accepted reality. Then, a memory surfaced. I remembered Brenda, Michael's former assistant, a quiet, observant woman who had always been fond of him, almost like a protective older sister. Maybe she had seen something she had dismissed at the time, something that now, through the lens of suspicion, might hold a different meaning. It was a long shot, but it was a lead. Brenda expressed her condolences, her voice soft, still unable to believe what had happened to Michael. I hesitantly asked her if Michael had seemed different in the weeks before everything happened. I pressed, asking if there were any strange calls, any unusual meetings. She frowned, thinking deeply, her brow furrowed in concentration. She confirmed he was definitely more stressed than usual, more than she had ever seen him. And then she mentioned one particular guy who kept calling Michael's personal cell, not his work one. Michael, she recalled, would always step out of the office to take those calls, and he seemed really agitated afterwards. When I asked for a name, she shook her head, saying she never got one, just a generic blocked number on the caller ID. She remembered Michael scoffing and calling him the collector, saying it was just a joke, a nickname for a particularly difficult client. But she added, almost as an afterthought, that he never looked like he was joking when he said it. The collector. The name resonated with an ominous chill. It wasn't a joke. I thanked Brenda, my mind racing, a new, terrifying piece of the puzzle falling into place. I left her office, the name echoing in my thoughts. I pulled out Michael's old phone, which I had kept charged, a relic of his life. I scrolled through his call logs, looking for unfamiliar numbers, especially around the time of the accident. I found a pattern, a series of calls from an unknown number, often late at night in the weeks leading up to his death. The same number, over and over. The collector. A difficult client. Or something far, far more sinister. The pieces were still scattered, disparate fragments of a hidden truth. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just grieving. I was searching. I was investigating. And the more I searched, the more I realized. Michael's death wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A beginning to a truth I might not be ready for. A truth that promised to shatter what remained of my world. The collector. The name had become an obsession, a dark star guiding my frantic research. The more I dug, the more I found whispers online. Not of a single person, but of a method. A chilling way of operating. People who disappeared when they couldn't pay their debts, or when they knew too much. It was a terrifying rabbit hole, a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. And to my horror, Michael's name, or at least hints of his activities, kept surfacing in the periphery of these shadowy connections. Michael played poker? High stakes? The revelation struck me with a fresh wave of shock and betrayal. He had never mentioned this, not once. I felt a pang of hurt, a deep sting of deception, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of understanding. He was hiding something. Something significant. Something dangerous. I recalled Michael's occasional late nights, which he always attributed to demanding work projects, to closing big deals. The more I uncovered, the more terrifying the truth became. Michael wasn't just stressed. He was in deep. And his accident wasn't an accident at all. It was a desperate escape, or a forced one, a disappearance orchestrated by those who held his life in their hands. My investigation led me to a nervous-looking man, a former acquaintance of Michael's from his poker days. We met in a secluded, almost empty diner on the outskirts of town. He was clearly scared, constantly glancing over his shoulder. The man I met spoke in hushed, almost inaudible tones, his eyes darting nervously around the empty diner. He told me, his voice barely a whisper, that Michael had gotten involved with the wrong people. He spoke of big money, of debts that spiraled out of control. He confirmed Michael owed a lot, a staggering sum. He stressed, his voice tight with fear, that they, he never named them directly, don't forget, they don't forgive. When I asked if they killed Michael, he shook his head vigorously, his eyes wide with genuine fear. He explained that they don't kill if they can help it. They make examples, or, more often, they make people disappear. They make it look like an accident, a tragic mishap, so no one comes looking. He couldn't confirm if Michael was alive, saying he hadn't seen him since the accident, but advised that if Michael was smart, he was gone, far away. He then urgently warned me that I should be too, that I was asking too many questions, putting myself in grave danger. The man quickly gathered his things, leaving me shaken, the unspoken threats hanging heavy in the air. As I left the diner, my heart pounding, I noticed a dark sedan parked across the street, its windows tinted, almost unnaturally dark. I felt eyes on me, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I quickened my pace, a cold dread seeping into my bones. The fear was real now. a cold, creeping dread that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with survival. But beneath it, a fierce, unyielding determination solidified within me. Michael was alive. I felt it in my bones. And I was going to find him, even if it meant walking directly into the very danger he had tried so desperately to escape. Later that night, as I sat alone in my darkened living room, my mind still reeling, my phone buzzed. An anonymous text message appeared on the screen. "Stop looking, for your own safety." The words were stark, chilling, a direct confirmation that I was being watched, that my every move was known. They knew I was looking. They were watching. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so agonizingly close to the truth. The stranger at the grave. He wasn't a figment of my imagination. He was a warning, a desperate, silent plea for me to see the truth, and I was finally seeing it, with terrifying clarity. I didn't know where I was going, not precisely, or what I would find when I got there. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My life, as I knew it, as I had lived it for the past 6 months, was over. And Michael's wasn't. Not yet. The trail had been faint, almost imperceptible, pieced together from whispers, old, forgotten addresses Michael had once scribbled, and cryptic notes I had finally managed to decipher from his hidden files. It had led me here, to the edge of nowhere, to a small, isolated cabin, nestled deep within a dense, almost impenetrable patch of woods, miles from the nearest town. I parked my car a significant distance away, hidden from view, and approached the cabin on foot. I moved cautiously, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sending a jolt of fear through me. Through the deepening twilight, I saw a faint, flickering light inside the cabin. I crept closer, my breath catching in my throat as I peeked through a grimy window. And there he was, Michael. My Michael. He was older, thinner, a rough beard covering his face, his hair longer, unkempt. But it was him, unmistakably him. Alive, a wave of emotions, relief, anger, confusion, and a profound, aching love washed over me, bringing tears to my eyes. My voice was a choked whisper, barely audible, just his name. Michael. I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to compose myself, then walked to the front door. I raised my hand and knocked. The sound, a dull thud against the old wood, echoed loudly in the quiet evening, shattering the illusion of peace. Inside, Michael froze. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with terror, his body tensing. He slowly, cautiously approached the door, a makeshift weapon, perhaps a heavy piece of wood, clutched in his hand. He opened it a crack, peering out, then his eyes widened, his jaw dropping as he saw me standing there. His voice was a disbelieving whisper, laced with a desperate urgency. He asked what I was doing there, telling me, almost pleadingly, that I shouldn't be here. I pushed the door open fully, stepping inside the small, rustic cabin. The air was thick with unspoken emotions, with years of grief and months of deception. The scent of wood smoke and damp earth filled my nostrils. My voice trembled, tears streaming freely down my face as I confronted him. He was alive. He was actually alive. Why, Michael? Why had he let me believe he was dead? He explained, his voice cracking with emotion, that he had to. They were after him. The collector. He had gotten in too deep with their dangerous games, and if he hadn't disappeared, they would have come after me, after our family. He had meticulously staged the accident, making it look utterly convincing, insisting it was the only way to protect me. He confessed that he had watched my funeral from afar, a ghost at his own burial. He said it had killed him, every single day, knowing what I was going through, knowing the pain I endured. But he couldn't risk it. They had eyes everywhere. He revealed that the man at the grave, the stranger who had whispered those impossible words, was one of the few people he trusted. A contact he had arranged to give me a subtle hint, something to hold on to if I ever started to suspect. He had been trying to help me without putting me in direct danger. I collapsed onto a worn, rough-hewn chair, overwhelmed by the torrent of revelations. Michael knelt in front of me, his eyes filled with a raw mixture of regret, pain, and desperate love. My anger, long suppressed, rose to the surface. I reminded him, my voice thick with tears, that I had mourned him, buried him, lived in a nightmare for 6 agonizing months. Did he ever think about what that would do to me? He bowed his head, admitting it was hell, every single day. But he thought it was the lesser of 2 evils. He insisted they would have killed us both, or worse. They had wanted him to work for them, to become one of their collectors, and he had refused. This, he claimed, was his only way out, his only chance to save me. He explained the full, terrifying extent of his debt, the escalating threats, the elaborate plan to fake his death, and the solitary, hidden life he had been living. He showed me scars, faded but still visible, proof of the danger he had faced, the violence he had endured. The truth was a bitter, painful pill to swallow. He hadn't abandoned me out of malice, but out of a desperate, misguided, and profoundly painful attempt to protect me. But the pain, the betrayal, the sheer agony of those 6 months, it was still raw, still a gaping wound. I looked at him, then around the small, desolate cabin, a new kind of resolve forming within me. I asked him what we do now. He looked around the confined space, his shoulders slumping, saying he didn't know. He couldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He was a ghost, he said. He wasn't a ghost, I told him, my voice firm, infused with a newfound strength. He was alive, and I had found him. My world had shattered that day at the hospital, but it had begun to rebuild, piece by painful piece, at his grave. And now, here, in this quiet, isolated cabin, the fragments were finally starting to fit, not into the life I knew, not into the future we had planned, but into a new, dangerous, and utterly real one. The man I loved wasn't dead, but the life we had, that was gone forever. And now we had to figure out what came next.